It started with a scream. Not the kind of scream you hear in horror movies, but the sharp, uncomfortable kind that slices through a live studio audience and leaves an echo of silence hanging in the air. Cameras were rolling, lights were blazing, and right there, on national television, celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay had just humiliated an older man in front of millions. "Get out of my kitchen," he barked, his voice trembling with rage. "You're a disgrace to the apron." The crowd laughed nervously, unsure if it was part of the show. The man in question, wearing a simple navy blue apron with slightly wrinkled slacks and worn leather shoes, said nothing. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the mic pack on the back of his collar. With quiet composure, he unclipped it, placed it gently on the countertop, and walked off the set without a word. The camera caught his exit in full. What the world didn't realize, not yet at least, was that they hadn't just witnessed a throwaway moment of reality show drama. They had just seen Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, a man known for his plain-spoken wisdom and quiet strength, publicly insulted by one of the world's most famous chefs. And he walked away not because he was weak, but because he was about to win in a way Ramsay couldn't begin to imagine. Rewind a few hours. The event was a televised celebrity cook-off for charity. The concept was simple. Mix politicians, actors, influencers, and world-renowned chefs, pair them up, and let them cook for a good cause. The cameras loved it. The audience ate it up. Kennedy had quietly accepted the invitation, not as a political move, but as a way to support a local food bank he had worked with for years. He requested no special treatment, no mention of his title. "Just John," he said. So the producers listed him as John K. from Louisiana. He was placed with Ramsay, which seemed like great TV, but things went sideways fast. Kennedy wasn't fast enough with the knife. His roux clumped, Ramsay erupted, the insults flew hard and fast, sharper than any blade in the kitchen. "What are you, a janitor in disguise? Have you ever seen a stove before?" he shouted. The audience laughed, not because it was funny, but because they were trained to. Kennedy just blinked, looked down at the food he was trying to prepare for children in need, and sighed. That's when he walked off. That's when the room went cold. And that's when the story really began. Backstage, Kennedy didn't demand an apology. He didn't call for cameras or publicists. He just shook the hand of the producer, thanked him quietly, and said he'd find another way to support the cause. But someone had already posted a clip online. A production assistant with a quick eye and faster thumbs uploaded the uncut moment with a simple caption. "Gordon Ramsay just kicked out a U.S. senator on live TV, and the man didn't say a word. Wow." Within hours, TikTok was flooded with remixes. Twitter exploded. Memes popped up showing Kennedy as a stoic monk surrounded by fire, with captions like "Silence is strength" and "He let the food speak for itself." The internet, once Ramsay's playground, had turned. But you haven't even heard the craziest part yet. Because what happened next would flip the script in a way no one expected. And trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. If you've ever watched someone get humiliated and wished for justice, if you believe in the quiet power of dignity over ego, then hit the like button right now and comment 9 below, because this story is about to take a turn so wild, even Hollywood couldn't write it better. The next morning, the sun hadn't even crept over the rooftops of Washington when Senator Kennedy's name was trending in more than a dozen countries. News outlets scrambled to verify if it was really him. The video was undeniable. His calm, weathered face, the unmistakable Louisiana drawl in the few words he spoke before walking off. "I think I'll step out now," was all he'd said. But that single sentence, delivered with quiet dignity, had hit like a freight train. Memes evolved into movements. People were sharing their own stories of being publicly embarrassed, bullied, or dismissed for not fitting the mold. The hashtags said it all. Stand like Kennedy, cuffed quiet strength. Ramsay exposed. By lunchtime, an op-ed in the New York Times titled "The Day Gordon Ramsay Lost the Kitchen" was the most read article of the day. Ramsay, for the first time in his career, wasn't being praised for his sharp tongue. He was being roasted by the world he once commanded. And yet, Kennedy remained silent. No interviews, no press releases. Instead, he was spotted by a small local news crew, volunteering at the same food bank that the charity show had been promoting. No cameras, no aides, no entourage, just a man in rolled-up sleeves handing out boxes of produce to struggling families. The news crew, stunned to find him there, asked if he had anything to say about what had happened on TV. Kennedy looked at the camera, paused for a moment, then said, "That kitchen wasn't mine. This one is." Then he turned back to help an elderly woman carry a bag to her car. The clip aired on the evening news. And once again, the internet exploded. Except this time it wasn't just memes, it was tears. People began donating in droves. The food bank's donation page crashed. Viewers from across the country and even from overseas wanted to contribute. Messages poured in. "I've never cried from a cooking show before," one viewer wrote, "but something about the way he walked away, it made me rethink everything." Another said, "I've always admired Gordon Ramsay, but I've never respected anyone more than I do Senator Kennedy right now." The donations didn't just surpass the charity show's original goal. They obliterated it. In 36 hours, they raised over $2 million. Meanwhile, inside Gordon Ramsay's camp, the storm was brewing. His team scrambled to manage the fallout. Social media comments were flooded with accusations of bullying, of arrogance, of elitism. Ramsay himself had gone quiet, a rarity in any universe. But it was too late. A new video leaked from backstage, recorded by a staffer, showing Ramsay laughing to his crew after Kennedy left. "What was that? The guy moved like molasses. Couldn't slice an onion if his life depended on it." That clip did more damage than anything else, because now it wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It was about cruelty. Intentional, personal cruelty. That's when things truly started unraveling. Talk show hosts who had once built their comedy routines around Ramsay's fiery temper were now changing their tone. "Maybe it's time we stop rewarding people for being mean," one said during a monologue. Others echoed the sentiment. Ramsay's sponsors began pulling back quietly. A cookware brand released a vague statement about re-evaluating partnerships. The charity event producers issued an apology to Kennedy. And then, finally, Gordon Ramsay broke his silence. He posted a video to Instagram, sitting at his kitchen counter, eyes puffy and voice strained. "I want to apologize," he said, "to Senator John Kennedy, to the viewers, to anyone who's ever been made to feel small. I lost my temper, and I lost sight of what mattered." But it was too polished, too rehearsed, too late. Comments poured in. "Not accepted." "Nice try." "You weren't sorry when you laughed behind his back." What Ramsay didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Kennedy had already moved on. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about responsibility. And what happened next would prove that real influence doesn't come from shouting louder than everyone else. It comes from showing up, even when no one's watching. But don't blink now, because what Kennedy was about to do next would turn this quiet little scandal into something much, much bigger. Something that would leave even Ramsay's most loyal fans questioning everything. 3 days later, the charity show announced a surprise reunion episode to celebrate the success of the campaign. But everyone knew what it really was. Damage control. Rumors swirled online. Would Gordon Ramsay apologize live? Would Senator Kennedy return? The internet was buzzing with speculation. Producers leaked just enough to feed the fire. "Both men have been invited," the press release said, "and the evening promises resolution, reflection, and a renewed commitment to kindness." But behind the scenes, tension was boiling. Kennedy hadn't confirmed his appearance, and Ramsay was spiraling. His once loyal fans were now split. Some called for his redemption, others demanded he be replaced. The brand he had built over decades was hanging by a thread. When the night arrived, viewership shattered records. The live stream platform crashed twice from the traffic. The set was the same. Glossy countertops, dramatic lighting, and that familiar, sizzling background track. But the energy had changed. Gone was the playful chaos of a celebrity cook-off. In its place was a solemn, almost sacred anticipation. Ramsay walked onto the stage first, noticeably subdued. No shouting, no swagger, just a stiff nod to the crowd and a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He took his place behind the chef's counter, adjusting his apron like a man grasping for control. Then the lights dimmed. A new spotlight illuminated the side entrance. The audience held its breath. And then, there he was. Senator John Kennedy stepped onto the stage, not in a suit, but in a simple button-down shirt with sleeves rolled up and a white apron tied at the waist. He walked slowly, calmly, the same way he had walked out just days before. But this time, the silence wasn't awkward. It was reverent. He gave a small wave, just enough to acknowledge the audience, then made his way to the counter opposite Ramsay without saying a word. The show host, clearly rattled, tried to fill the silence with warmth. "Senator Kennedy, thank you for joining us again." But Kennedy raised a hand gently. "No need for introductions. Let's just cook." And so they did. For the first 5 minutes, nothing was said. Pots clanged, water boiled, and knives chopped in perfect rhythm. Ramsay kept stealing glances, as if waiting for the punch he knew he deserved. But Kennedy didn't offer it. He simply focused on the dish. Then, finally, Ramsay cleared his throat and spoke, low and shaky. "I owe you an apology." Kennedy didn't look up. "You already gave one online." "I meant a real one," Ramsay said. "In person." The cameras zoomed in. The audience leaned forward. Kennedy paused, placed his knife down, and looked across the counter. "I'm not here to be apologized to," he said calmly. "I'm here because there are people out there who still need meals, who still feel invisible, and if me being here helps them get what they need, then I'll show up, no matter what kitchen it is." The words landed like thunder. Ramsay opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once he had nothing to say. The host tried to pivot, offering some pre-written praise about humility and second chances, but the moment had already shifted. Kennedy had taken the spotlight and handed it right back to the cause. Then came the twist no one expected. After the meal was served and the cameras were about to cut to credits, Kennedy stepped forward. "Before we wrap, I'd like to make a small announcement." The room quieted again. Over the past few days, people have sent in donations, millions, in fact. But they didn't just donate because of what happened here. They donated because they believed in something bigger. So starting today, I'm personally matching the first $1 million raised by the viewers watching tonight. Not in my name, but in the name of every person who's ever been talked over, stepped on, or laughed at while trying to do something good. The crowd erupted. Even the crew behind the cameras clapped. Ramsay looked like he had been hit by a truck. Not from jealousy, but from something deeper. Humility. It washed over him like cold water, and for the first time in his career, he realized what real power looked like. It wasn't in shouting. It wasn't in branding. It was in showing up when you didn't have to, and giving more than you took. Backstage, after the cameras faded to black, Ramsay approached Kennedy slowly. "I don't think I'll ever live this down," he said. Kennedy turned to him, eyes kind but unwavering. "Maybe you're not supposed to. Some mistakes are meant to stay with us, so we don't repeat them." Ramsay nodded, swallowing hard. "Do you think people will forgive me?" Kennedy gave a small shrug. "They might. But first you've got to forgive yourself. And earn it back, one plate at a time." What neither of them knew then was that this story wasn't over. Not even close. Because someone in the audience had captured a moment that would reignite the fire all over again. One so unexpected, it would make the world see both men in a whole new light. It happened less than 5 minutes after the broadcast ended. The lights were dimmed, the audience was filing out, and most of the crew were already packing up cables and wiping down counters. But one young woman in the second row, a culinary student named Mia, was still clutching her phone, her hands trembling slightly. She hadn't meant to film it. At first, she'd just been trying to get a picture of Senator Kennedy after the show. But what she captured instead was a private moment that felt like a scene from a movie. As Ramsay and Kennedy spoke quietly off to the side, Mia had instinctively hit record. Not out of malice, but instinct. Something about the way Kennedy stood, relaxed, gracious, grounded, was magnetic. The audio was faint, but clear enough. The world was about to hear something they weren't meant to. And for once, it would heal instead of destroy. That night, Mia uploaded the video with a simple caption. What Senator Kennedy told Gordon Ramsay after the cameras stopped. Within hours, the video had over 2 million views. By morning, it had become the #1 trending short on YouTube. Why? Because what Kennedy said wasn't rehearsed, wasn't polished, wasn't for the spotlight. It was the kind of raw honesty that people weren't used to hearing from anyone on a screen, much less a public figure. In the clip, Kennedy can be seen placing a gentle hand on Ramsay's shoulder. "You're not a bad man," he said. "You just forgot for a minute who you're really cooking for." Ramsay looked at him, visibly moved, almost broken. "You think it's too late?" he asked. Kennedy shook his head. "Not if your next meal feeds someone who can't pay you back." It was simple, but it was devastatingly human, and it landed like a stone dropped in a still lake, ripples of empathy spreading across every corner of the internet. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about viral humiliation or poetic revenge. It became something deeper, something real. Comment sections filled not with hate, but reflection. Chefs wrote about moments when they'd lost their own tempers. Teachers admitted to yelling at students and regretting it for years. Parents talked about saying the wrong things and not knowing how to say sorry. The internet wasn't laughing anymore. It was listening. Major outlets picked up Mia's video. Headlines shifted from Ramsay's career in jeopardy to Senator Kennedy teaches a masterclass in forgiveness. Podcasts dissected the moment. Social psychologists broke it down as an example of emotional intelligence in real time. Even Gordon's harshest critics began to soften. Because in that moment, Ramsay didn't look like a villain. He looked like someone learning how to be better. And Kennedy? He didn't look like a politician. He looked like the kind of man people wished they had in their corner growing up. Then came the real twist. Just days later, Gordon Ramsay posted a new video. No lighting, no music, just him, standing in a modest kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled, eyes tired, apron on. He addressed the camera directly. "I've spent my life trying to be the best chef in every room," he said. "But Senator Kennedy reminded me, the best chef isn't the loudest, the fastest, or the most famous. It's the one who cooks with heart, for others, not for ego." He then announced that he would personally be opening 5 pop-up kitchens across low-income neighborhoods in the South, starting with Baton Rouge. "And I won't be shouting in those kitchens," he added with a soft smile. "I'll be listening." The response was overwhelming. Even people who had sworn off Ramsay clicked share. It wasn't about brand repair anymore. It was about something bigger: redemption, growth, humility, the kind of transformation that's so rare people can't help but watch. Senator Kennedy, when asked about Ramsay's initiative, simply replied, "The best apologies aren't spoken. They're served." That line alone was quoted by every outlet from CNN to Food and Wine magazine. It was printed on posters at food banks and community centers. It became a mantra. And yet, even as the noise grew, Kennedy stayed quiet. He kept showing up at the food bank, kept helping quietly in soup kitchens without press or cameras. But his inbox was different now, flooded with letters from kids, veterans, mothers, even ex-convicts, all writing to say, "I've never seen someone stand up without saying a word. Thank you for reminding me it's possible." But the most surprising letter of all didn't come from a fan. It came from someone unexpected, someone no one thought would ever reach out. And when Kennedy opened it, he knew the story wasn't over yet, not even close, because what was written inside would pull him into one final chapter, one that would test everything he believed about dignity, reputation, and the cost of second chances. The letter arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, no official seal. Just the words, "For Senator John Kennedy," written in careful, almost hesitant handwriting. His assistant nearly discarded it, assuming it was another thank you note among the dozens flooding his office every day. But something about the envelope felt different. It was too quiet, too heavy. Kennedy noticed it right away. He picked it up, turned it in his fingers, and instinctively knew. This wasn't from a fan. This was from someone carrying the weight of something unspoken. Inside was a single handwritten page. No greeting, no sign-off. Just a raw confession that hit harder than any headline ever could. "I was the one who leaked the clip of Gordon mocking you backstage, not because I hated him, but because I worked for him. And I saw it happen too many times, to interns, to staff, to people who couldn't afford to talk back. I stayed silent. I laughed when everyone else did. But when I saw you walk away without flinching, something inside me snapped. I realized we weren't just watching a man walk out of a kitchen. We were watching someone walk away from ego, from noise, from cruelty, and still win. And I thought, maybe if the world saw what he did after you left, they'd finally stop clapping for bullies." Kennedy read the note twice, slowly. His jaw didn't tighten. He didn't sigh. He simply folded it neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on his desk. Not for drama, not for vengeance, but because he understood. Sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. And sometimes the truth needs more than a microphone. It needs timing and courage. That afternoon, Kennedy requested a meeting, quiet, off the record, with Gordon Ramsay. No camera crews, no press, just two men in a quiet room above a local church kitchen in Baton Rouge. When Ramsay arrived, he looked older than he had days before. Not in years, but in wear. He sat down, folded his hands, and said nothing. Kennedy reached into his coat pocket, slid the letter across the table, and leaned back. "Someone wanted you to see this," he said. Ramsay read it slowly, his face unreadable. When he finished, he placed it down carefully and whispered, "It's true. All of it." There was a long silence, then Kennedy spoke. "You know, I've made mistakes too. Not the kind that make headlines, but the kind you carry with you, the kind that echo in your head at 3 a.m. He looked Ramsay square in the eyes. "But the difference between shame and redemption is what you do next." Ramsay nodded. "I want to change, John, I do, but I don't know where to start." "You already did," Kennedy said, "by showing up today." The two men stood, Not as senator and celebrity, but as human beings, flawed, tired, and finally honest. They shook hands. It wasn't a gesture for the cameras. It was the quiet kind of handshake that means something. The kind that says, "We may not fix everything today, but we're done pretending nothing's broken." The next week, something remarkable happened. Ramsay announced he would be launching a mentorship program for culinary students. Not the privileged ones in elite schools, but the kids cooking dinner for their siblings at home, or working in diners to pay rent. He called it the Second Fire. And in the press release, he wrote just 10 words. "Real kitchens don't run on rage, they run on hope." Meanwhile, Senator Kennedy was invited to speak at a national conference on leadership. Instead of delivering a traditional political address, he walked on stage with an apron slung over his shoulder and opened with a story. "I learned something in a kitchen this month," he said, voice slow, deliberate. "That silence doesn't mean weakness, that humility can humble the proud, that you don't need to win an argument to win someone's respect." The crowd fell silent. No scrolling, no coughing, just eyes locked on him. "We spend too much time asking who's right. Maybe it's time we start asking who's kind." Applause didn't just break out, it erupted. Not because of applause lines, but because people were starving for that kind of truth. And just when the moment felt complete, Kennedy held up the letter. He didn't name the sender. He didn't point fingers. He just said, "This was written by someone who chose courage over comfort." Let that be a reminder. What we expose in others can often reveal who we are becoming. Outside the auditorium, people weren't talking about Gordon Ramsay's fall from grace anymore. They were talking about how a senator reminded the world what grace looks like. But there was one more twist still to come. One final moment that no one, not even Kennedy, could have predicted. A moment that would turn the story from redemption into something even more powerful. Legacy. It happened a month later, almost to the day. Senator Kennedy was back home in Louisiana, sitting beneath the wide porch of his modest countryside house, sipping coffee from an old mug that read, "World's Okayest Cook." The sun was setting slow, amber light painting the fields gold. It should have been a quiet evening. But his phone buzzed with a message that stopped him mid-sip. It was from Mia, the culinary student who had filmed the now famous backstage clip. Just a single sentence. "You need to come see this." Attached was a link to a live video. Kennedy clicked. The screen lit up with the interior of a small community kitchen in Detroit. Nothing fancy. Just stainless steel counters, a few gas stoves, and about a dozen teenagers in aprons. But what caught Kennedy's breath wasn't the kitchen. It was the man in the center. Gordon Ramsay. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't performing. He was kneeling beside a young boy, showing him how to properly dice onions. His voice was calm, measured, almost soft. The caption on the live feed read, "The Second Fire. First workshop begins." In the comments section, people were flooding in. "He really did it." Kennedy was right. This is what redemption looks like. And then it happened. The boy Ramsay was coaching looked up at him and asked, "Did you really get yelled at by a senator?" The room chuckled. Ramsay smiled. "No," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "I got taught by one." The kids laughed again, but Kennedy didn't. He just sat back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Because that was the moment he knew. The story had left him. It now belonged to others. It had become something bigger. News outlets covered the workshop the next day, not as celebrity gossip, but as a blueprint. Headlines like, "From humiliation to hope, Ramsay and Kennedy inspire a generation" began popping up. Community centers across the country started reaching out, wanting to partner with the Second Fire. Parents were writing in to say their kids wanted to cook. Teachers were using Kennedy's story in character education classes, Even churches began referencing the kitchen incident in sermons, less about shame, more about growth. But perhaps the most powerful moment came from a young girl in Brooklyn who had been in and out of the foster system. She wrote an open letter that was shared by thousands. "I used to think being quiet meant being weak, that if you didn't fight back, you'd disappear. But when I saw Senator Kennedy just stand there while someone screamed at him and then walk away with dignity, I realized you can be strong without being loud. And when I saw Gordon Ramsay try to fix it, not with words but with actions, I believed people could change. They taught me something no textbook ever did. Kindness is louder than pride." That letter was printed and pinned to the wall in Kennedy's Baton Rouge office. Right beside it, another note, written in Gordon's sharp, slanted handwriting. "Thank you for the quiet lesson I'll never forget." That was the legacy. Not the viral clip, not the outrage, not the fall from grace, but the way a single act of restraint became a ripple that turned into a wave that cleaned out pride, swept in grace, and redefined what strength really looks like. In his final public statement about the event, Kennedy said it best. "We live in a world obsessed with louder opinions, louder insults, but maybe the next chapter of our culture isn't written by the ones who shout the hardest, but by those who listen the longest, who serve, not to be seen, but because they remember what hunger feels like." So if you've ever been humiliated or overlooked or told you don't belong, remember this. You don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you fight it by walking out of the kitchen, letting the silence speak for you, and letting time show the world who you really are. Because in the end, justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes justice is watching someone who used to scream finally learn how to whisper.